She gave birth, and her millionaire husband asked for a divorce. But what she did, nobody expected. Nobody is prepared to be betrayed at the very moment they need love the most. And yet, that's exactly what happened to Isadora Santos. Maternity ward room 312 was silent. All you could hear was the newborn Clara's gentle breathing, nestled in her mother's arms. 6 hours earlier, Isadora had gone through a difficult C-section, but now she only wanted to feel her daughter's warm skin against her chest and treasure this moment. She thought she was living the beginning of a new life. She just didn't know that this tender moment would also mark the beginning of the end. The door opened slowly. Rodrigo entered with an oddly rigid posture. He wasn't carrying flowers. He didn't smile. He only held a manila envelope in his hands, and the coldness in his eyes belonged to someone who hadn't loved her in a long time. He didn't approach the crib or caress the baby. He simply dropped the envelope on the bedside table like it was any ordinary document. Then he said in a dry voice, "Sign when you can. I want a divorce." Isadora thought she must have misheard. Her stitches still burned, her body ached with exhaustion, her breasts were full of milk, and now, this. "What do you mean, Rodrigo?" He didn't hesitate. "I can't do this anymore. Lorena's pregnant. We're getting married next month." Lorena, the cheerful blonde secretary, 28 years old, the same one who always answered Isadora's calls at the office with exaggerated kindness. The one Rodrigo insisted was just an employee. Isadora tried to breathe, but no air came. What had once been only a suspicion was now right there in front of her, spelled out in black and white. Clara, her daughter, slept peacefully, and she, a first-time mother, was being discarded, like waste, like a disposable problem. Rodrigo spoke calmly, as if explaining a contract. He said their marriage had been dead for years, that she was suitable, but that true love was something else. That with Lorena, he felt alive. That he needed to move on. Then, looking at their daughter with utter indifference, he let slip one of the cruelest lines a woman can hear. "You'll never accomplish anything on your own. You've always depended on me for everything." Isadora, seated on the bed and holding her baby with trembling arms, didn't even have the strength to scream. Something inside her shattered, but also, for the first time in many years, something awakened. She said nothing. She only watched Rodrigo leave the room, already taking a phone call, as though nothing had happened, as if the end of a marriage, the birth of a daughter, and the destruction of a woman were mere formalities to be handled between meetings. Inside the envelope were more than the divorce papers. There was an indecent proposal, alimony of 300 reis for Clara and 60 days to vacate the home they'd shared. 60 days to rebuild an entire life. Isadora looked at her daughter. Little Clara, with her mouth slightly open and eyes closed, seemed oblivious to the chaos that had just occurred. But there, in that silence between mother and child, something was born that Rodrigo could never have imagined. A dormant strength, a clear anger, a silent resolve. Isadora knew that no one would come to save her, and no matter how much her world was crumbling, a certainty burned inside her like wildfire. She would no longer be the woman who kept her head down. 3 days later, still stitched up and with her dignity in pieces, Isadora left the maternity ward with Clara in her arms. She had nowhere to go, but she held one unshakable conviction. Rodrigo had made the biggest mistake of his life. She asked the taxi driver to stop in front of the house she'd lived in for 10 years. There was Lorena already rearranging the potted plants on the porch as if she were the new lady of the house, the very image of humiliation. But Isadora didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply lifted her daughter in her arms, looked straight ahead, and knew, with the resolve of someone who has nothing left to lose, that this unbearable pain would become her fuel. She might not yet know how, she might not yet know when, But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was going to start over. She was going to rebuild. She was going to triumph. And one day, Rodrigo would see, far too late, that he had abandoned a woman he should never have underestimated. Time was supposed to heal, but for Isadora, the days after giving birth felt like an endless punishment. Still recovering from surgery, she now shared a tiny room with Clara at her friend Julia's house. Faded pink walls, the smell of porridge and diapers, the baby's cries in the middle of the night. Everything was real, yet it felt too surreal for a woman who just days before believed she had a stable life. Rodrigo hadn't simply vanished. He was on the offensive, relentless. He acted as if he were closing a business deal, not ending a 15-year marriage. He sent curt messages, made demands through lawyers, treated Isadora like an employee delaying a delivery. The first blow came over the phone on a chilly morning. "Isadora, it's Lorena. I just wanted to check if Clara is doing okay. Rodrigo and I are worried." Her voice was sweet, artificial, uncomfortably calm. "Worried?" Isadora replied, unable to hide her irony. "You took everything from me." Lorena sighed as if speaking to a sulky child. "Look, Isa, we're trying to be reasonable. Rodrigo will keep the support he offered, 300 reais. That's more than what a lot of people get, but you need to be out of the house by Sunday. We're having the wedding there." A wedding, in the house that was still officially hers. Isadora felt the ground vanish beneath her for a moment, but she didn't cry. Not in front of Lorena. "You monsters," she whispered. "Don't be dramatic, Isa. Think of Clara's stability. You can start over somewhere else." That was the plan, to start over somewhere else. But with 300 reais and a newborn, even buying a can of formula felt impossible. After hanging up, Isadora collapsed onto Julia's living room couch. Anger fused with fear, running through her body like electricity. She felt small, discarded, disposable. "Maybe they're right," she murmured. "Maybe I'll never do anything on my own." Julia stopped what she was doing and looked at her friend with unwavering honesty. "Isadora, you're a civil engineer, top of your class at the best university in the country. You've designed buildings and bridges. You are not what Rodrigo tried to make you believe." But Isadora hesitated. For years she'd been told she wasn't enough, that she was better off at home, that the workforce was too brutal for her. She believed it, and that was her mistake. "It's been 5 years since I last worked. Nobody will hire me now," she said, more to herself than to convince Julia. "Then work for me." Isadora looked up, surprised. "What do you mean? I have 3 clients who need structural analysis. I need someone good, and you're the best. I'll pay you 3,000 reais per project." Isadora fell silent. "Is this charity?" "It's business. Your choice. Accept Rodrigo's scraps or prove you still got it." That night, while Clara slept in a makeshift crib in the corner, Isadora lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The dilemma throbbed inside her like an open wound. Take her friend's lifeline or keep wilting under the weight of abandonment. By morning she whispered, "I'll do it." And in that instant, a spark ignited within her. Later that day, she received the files for her first project. Calculations, blueprints, reports, once her language, her passion, her identity. With the baby at her side, between feedings and cries, Isadora spent the afternoon with pencil, ruler, and coffee. For the first time in ages, she felt alive. This was her domain. Here, no one could diminish her. The next day, she went to the client's office, a real estate developer. She entered nervously, clutching a folder and her updated resume. Determined despite her jitters, she introduced herself. "Are you Isadora Santos?" the man asked. "Yes, I'm a civil engineer. I'd like to present my analysis." For an hour, she spoke of structural reinforcement, spans and columns, cost-effectiveness and safety. He listened quietly. When she finished, he said, "3 engineers tried this before. None caught this issue. Excellent work. When can you start?" Isadora left that office with a signed contract, a deposit in her account, and a renewed conviction. She was still good. She still could. But when she got home, she found another envelope on the table. Another legal notice. Rodrigo now wanted to contest Clara's paternity. Isadora's blood ran cold. Abandonment wasn't enough. He wanted to erase her. In that moment, she understood. This wasn't about money. It was about control. Rodrigo needed her small, dependent, submissive. But he'd forgotten one thing. She had become the woman she was before she met him. And this time, she wasn't going to stop halfway. When everything seems lost, some call it madness, others call it courage. For Isadora Santos, there was no difference between the two anymore. Only one thing mattered. She had to fight. The paternity challenge was more than a threat. It was a declaration of war. Rodrigo didn't just want to rid himself of her. He wanted to obliterate any trace of their family, including their daughter. Isadora took the document to the nearest public defender. His reply was blunt. If he pushes this, it could take up to 2 years to resolve. During that time, there's no support guarantee. You'll need solid evidence. But Rodrigo was cunning. He covered his tracks, underreported income, manipulated bank statements, an official version that painted him almost as the victim. Julia tried to calm her, but Isadora couldn't sleep. She thought, she jotted notes, she called, she researched. In one silent night, an idea struck. If he was hiding evidence, it had to be close to him. The next day, resume in hand, she went to a janitorial service that worked at Rodrigo's company, Mendez Imports. She applied for a job, lied about her qualifications, said she needed work urgently. The pay was minimum wage, no benefits, but that access was exactly what she needed. "You sure about this?" the manager asked, suspicious. "You seem overqualified." Isadora only smiled. "I am. When can I start?" At 5 sharp the next morning, she donned the blue uniform, slipped on worn sneakers, tied back her hair. No more pride, only mission. She entered through the back door of the same building where, years ago, she'd stride in wearing heels to meet her husband for lunch. Now she pushed a cart of buckets and rags, invisible. And for the first time, that was her advantage. Mrs. Rosa, head of cleaning, warned her right away. "They don't like seeing us around during office hours. Clean everything before 8. After that, only the restrooms. If there's any trouble, it's you who gets blamed." Isadora nodded. She knew she couldn't slip up. On the 3rd day, she managed to get into Rodrigo's office before he arrived. Her hands shook. Time was limited. She opened drawers, found folders, spreadsheets, receipts. Quickly, she photographed everything with her hidden phone. Pay stubs showing his real salary, transfers to undisclosed accounts, bank statements, and most damningly, a coded spreadsheet of expenses for Lorena. Rodrigo lied about everything, and now she could prove it. She was putting the last documents away when she heard footsteps. Rodrigo was coming. Her heart pounded. No time to escape, she ducked behind his desk. He entered on the phone. "Babe, relax. She won't get anything. I declared only 10 grand. Worst case, she'll get 1,000 in support. Marina never had the guts for anything." Marina. The wrong name. He didn't even remember the woman he'd tried to destroy. Isadora hit record. She captured every word, including his laugh in the line. She was never able to do anything on her own, and she never will. When he left for a meeting, Isadora walked out with steady steps. She was trembling, but not from fear, from victory. That night she handed everything to Julia. I got it. Proofs, recordings, pay stubs, everything. Julia listened to the audio, stunned. This is game over. No, Isadora corrected. This is the turning point. The next day, Isadora's lawyer filed for support based on Rodrigo's real income, recognition of paternity, and back pay dating to Clara's birth. Rodrigo didn't know it yet, but his empire of lies was starting to crumble. And Isadora. She cleaned restrooms by day and ran structural calculations by night, but she slept peacefully, for the first time in a long while, because now she finally had the evidence. She had the truth. And more than that, she had the courage he thought she never would. Rodrigo was quiet, and to Isadora, his silence was louder than any threat. The documents were now in the hands of the courts. The bank statements, the pay stubs, the recording of Rodrigo's own voice confessing he lied about his income. This man, who'd always considered himself untouchable now, had a ticking time bomb under his own desk. But the next blow didn't come from him. It came from the person least expected, Lorena. She showed up at Julia's house unannounced, unrecognizable. The elegance and confidence she'd once worn were gone. In their place was someone on the verge of collapse, pregnant, exhausted, her eyes haunted by loss. She collapsed onto the sofa without ceremony and told her story. Rodrigo had cheated on her too, with the new secretary, repeating the same plot that destroyed Isadora. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Lorena had uncovered far nastier secrets than infidelity. Rodrigo was running secret offshore accounts filled with bribes and illegal supplier kickbacks, money laundering, tax evasion, fraud. And the shocker, she had proof, statements, documents, contracts signed under false names. Desperate, Lorena made a proposal. She wanted to form an alliance with Isadora. She wanted to take him down, to destroy everything he'd built, not for justice, but for revenge. Isadora listened carefully. She knew what Lorena held could ruin Rodrigo for good, but she also knew a new choice lay before her. She could use those proofs to drag him through the tabloids, expose his lies, and drag him into a public scandal. The lure of vengeance was strong, and in some ways, righteous. But looking at Clara sleeping in her crib, Isadora realized something larger. Her victory wouldn't be defined by his destruction, but by the building of her new life. The next day, she handed her lawyer only the evidence necessary to secure Clara's rights: fair support, official paternity recognition, and back pay. The rest, she kept. Not out of fear, but by choice. To avenge Rodrigo would trap her in the same dirty game he always played. Choosing justice was the act of cutting the final tie to him. It was saying, through her actions, that she didn't need to beat him. She just needed to outgrow him. Lorena left frustrated, without an alliance, without her revenge. But Isadora didn't look back. She had discovered that a woman's true strength isn't in silent vengeance, but in the dignity she chooses to preserve, even when she has every reason to cast it aside. Isadora had won the first battle. The courts recognized Clara's rights. Support was recalculated based on Rodrigo's real income, and the arrears were paid quietly, as one pays to avoid exposure. But that was only the beginning. While Rodrigo hid behind his lawyers, Isadora dove back into the world that had always been hers: engineering. The project she'd started for Julia became her showcase. New clients came by referral, small at first, then growing. In less than 6 months, what had been a favor for a friend turned into a full professional portfolio. And before she knew it, she was invited to join one of the country's largest construction firms. At first, she hesitated. She still saw herself as the woman who'd been abandoned, but she accepted, and in that new environment, Isadora flourished. She was meticulous, visionary, both technical and empathetic, the rare combination that turns engineers into leaders. In no time, she was promoted to project manager, then to technical director, and then the unthinkable happened. She became a partner. The name Rodrigo once tried to erase was now engraved on the plaque at the entrance of the company's flagship building. But the past hadn't given up on her yet. Rodrigo resurfaced, not with requests, but with attacks. He filed a new lawsuit. He wanted joint custody of Clara, claiming that Isadora, because she worked too much, lacked emotional stability and time to raise their daughter. It was another stab in the back. He didn't want to be a father. He wanted control. And when he realized he couldn't use money, he tried to use their daughter. Isadora almost broke. For a moment, she thought about giving up, ending it all, becoming small again just to protect Clara. But she looked around. She was in an office she'd helped build. On the desk were award-winning blueprints. On the wall, international certificates. In her heart, her daughter growing up healthy and happy in a home of peace. She had built this on her own. Rodrigo had no power here. The hearing was set. In front of the judge, Isadora hardly had to speak. The prosecution had everything: records of abandonment, paternal neglect, public contradictions, and his previous paternity denial attempt. Rodrigo lost, for good. He left the courtroom with his head down, for the first time, without a single threat in his eyes. Isadora didn't celebrate. There was no glory in that victory, only relief. Now she was truly free to move on, whole, without shadows. Days later, she received an unexpected offer. A French multinational, impressed by her work, wanted to hire her to lead projects across Latin America. A 7-figure salary, international recognition, the kind of invitation that changes any professional's life. But what impressed Isadora most wasn't the offer. It was the reason behind it. The company's director, a powerful woman, said, "I've heard your story. We need someone who knows how to fall and rise again. You embody that." And in that moment, Isadora realized she was not just an engineer of bridges and buildings, she was an engineer of her own life. And she had just completed her greatest work to date, the woman Rodrigo never imagined she could become. Rodrigo Mendez had vanished. No lawsuits, no threats, no sound. For months, Isadora lived in silence, the kind of silence that finally felt like peace. Clara grew strong and happy, full of questions and smiles. The house felt light. Work was fulfilling. Life, after so much pain, was starting to feel like a reward. But that calm ended on a grey morning when Julia came in, face tense, holding an envelope. It was a letter. No letterhead, no visible signature. But the sender's name was clear, Rodrigo. In his own handwriting was the unthinkable, a request to meet her. Just once. What should she do? Say no, ignore it, tear it up? Isadora thought it over for hours. Deep down, she knew she needed to hear him out, not for his sake, but for her own. They agreed to meet at the public hospital in the South Zone. Rodrigo was admitted with aggressive terminal cancer. His body was thin, his eyes sunken. He looked like someone who'd already lost everything, including his pride. There was no arrogance, no swagger, just a broken man, and genuinely remorseful. With a weak voice, he confessed what Isadora had already suspected. It was never about Lorena or passion. It was fear. Fear of being overshadowed. Fear of being inferior to a woman who shone. Fear of losing control. He told her he'd plotted to pull her away from her career, pushed her into the housewife role, because he knew that if she'd stayed on projects, she would outshine him in everything. And when she got pregnant, he saw the perfect opportunity to get rid of her. And he did it cruelly, but he never found peace, only darkness. Now, on the brink of death, he was asking for forgiveness, not to ease his conscience, but because he didn't want to die, hated by the person he betrayed the most. Isadora listened. No tears, no anger, no rush. And there, in that simple hospital room, she realized that forgiving isn't forgetting, nor absolving. It's freeing yourself from someone else's pain. It's refusing to carry a burden that no longer belongs to you. She didn't say, "I forgive you." It wasn't necessary. She simply stood up, looked into his eyes one last time and said, "I survived." Then she turned and walked away. No guilt, no fear, nothing left to prove. Rodrigo passed away a week later. In his will, he left only one thing for Clara, a letter. Isadora kept it. Not for now, but for someday, when her daughter was ready to know the truth. And in that moment, the final tie was severed. Rodrigo left her life just as he'd entered that maternity ward years ago, empty, confused, running away from the woman he never managed to destroy. But now she was someone else, and she was about to reach the highest point of her journey. Time passed. Clara was now 8 years old, bright eyes, endless curiosity, and that lightness only kids raised with love and truth carry. Isadora herself had been completely transformed, not just professionally, though that too had been extraordinary. Her name now appeared in technical journals, on international conference panels, on million-dollar contracts crossing borders. She was respected, admired, celebrated. But that wasn't what truly defined her. What made Isadora unique was the path she'd walked to get there, and how she chose to move through her own pain without losing herself. The pinnacle of her career was announced at an official ceremony. Isadora would oversee construction of the largest bridge in Latin America, linking regions long left out of development. A billion-dollar high-risk project demanding not just technical skill, but vision, patience, and leadership. Months later, the bridge was complete. On opening day, officials gave speeches, awards were handed out, but no one held the crowd's attention like Isadora. She stepped onto the stage with Clara by her side, took the microphone, breathed deeply, and looked out at the massive span before her. Steel, concrete, precision and hope. And she said simply, "This bridge doesn't just connect two banks of land. It connects pain to purpose, fear to courage, weakness to strength." This bridge tells the story of someone who chose not to stop at destruction, but to cross right through it, like so many women do every single day, and like my daughter will learn to do if life ever tries to knock her down. At that moment, the silence was absolute. Then the applause rose like a wave. On the official plaque, etched in steel, was the bridge's final name, Bridge of Hope, Eng Isadora Santos. It wasn't just a physical structure. It was the symbol of everything she'd rebuilt inside herself. Dignity, identity, independence. All the things they had once tried to take away and that she decided to reclaim, piece by piece. Returning home that night, Clara asked if she could someday share that story with others. Isadora smiled. "You can, sweetie, but wait for the right time. Some truths need to mature before they're shared." Then, looking at her daughter, she added, "The most important thing is that the story goes on. Not because of me, but for all the women who still have to cross their own bridges and need to know it's possible. It's hard, but it's possible." Because in the end, it wasn't Rodrigo who defeated her. Nor was it vengeance that made her stronger. It was the choice to keep going, even when everything said she couldn't. If this story moved you, comment one word, strength, and hit like so this message reaches more hearts.